pretty much sums up what it is. It's a podcast that talks about nerd culture from the perspective of an African American. It's not just for African Americans, but it's getting that subculture. It's a subculture of a subculture, which is actually a microculture of nerds that are Black. So we talk about the regular Batman, Superman, DC, Marvel. We talk about Harry Potter. We talk about Game of Thrones. We talk about The Walking Dead. But we also talk about the things that don't necessarily get talked about in other shows. For example, when we talk about Star Wars, we talk about Finn more than we would talk about, anyone else. We talk about Black Panther, and not just the African American characters, but deeper issues like, does it make sense for an African American to play an African character? Why or not? Why not? What is that difference, and what does it do to a movie like the Black Panther? We get into deeper issues like societal issues, like we talk about cosplay, but not just cosplay, things like racism in cosplay, things that you wouldn't know necessarily exist. Like, for instance, you have someone dresses as Superman. People say, oh, look, you're at a convention and you're dressed as Superman. But if you're African American and you want to be Supergirl, you want to be Catwoman, you're no longer Catwoman or Supergirl, you're Black Catwoman, you're Black Supergirl, you're Black Sailor Moon. What does that mean, and what does that do, and why is that? But also, for someone like me, you just grow up and you're a nerd and you're different. But not only that, when you're Black and you're a nerd, you're super different. So there aren't a lot of us out there. We kind of have to rally together, and we have to stick together and talk about the things that we want to talk about together. I'm not the only host on the show. If you listen, we have two other co-hosts who are on there all the time. Jay is he's our brains behind the operation. He's the guy that's read all the comics. He's read all the books. Yes, I'm a reader. I read the books, but he reads the books and the comics and the forums and the news and everything. So any minutia, any detail, any background story, you're gonna get that from our guy, Jay. Jay, too, is an avid comic book reader. He's read everything. I can't sit here and tell you everything that J2's read because he reads. Not only does he read, but he writes. So he understands the dynamic. He understands what's supposed to be in a comic. He's an excellent co-host on this show. And he knows history like no one else knows history. He knows the background from the 70s, from the 60s. He really brings that into his level of analysis on the show, and we love him for that. Listening to our podcast, what we hope the listeners are getting is a unique perspective on pop culture from someone who has a similar background, hopefully, to the listeners, something that's different from the other podcasts that you get. Like, I listen to a lot of Harry Potter podcasts. Harry Potter is my favorite fandom. Everyone who knows me or listens to the show knows this. I also listen to Game of Thrones podcasts. But the people who are speaking don't speak like me, and they don't speak about the things that I want to speak about. So what I want to do is to fill that void. I want to talk about things from a perspective that's not necessarily addressed in other fandoms or in other shows or in other different levels of analysis. Find us at www.facebook.com/Negro Justice League, at www.twitter.com/BlackNerdCast. You can also subscribe to us on iTunes by searching for Negro Justice League.